Okay folks, this is Boiler Wash 1 here. I usually don't do narrated videos and such, but this is probably the weirdest thing I've run across in a while, so I'm going to do a little video about it. I'm about 20 miles south of Coshocton, Ohio, on Ohio Route 16, and literally right next to the parkway, which is over there, I found this weird, like, abandoned history park. There's no signage for it, there's nothing here, the stuff's just here and overgrown and somebody's left it. The only thing I found is that there's a little sign over there that says "Help Us Save History," or "Help Us Save Yesterday Park," or something like that. And the neat thing about it is that this place has, like, its little own complete industrial railroad just sort of abandoned sitting out here. So we're going to take a look around and see what this place has. First, here's the entrance to this place. As you can see, it looks like somebody at some points tried to set up like some sort of industrial, like, machinery park or something along those lines. There's got antique tractors and railroad equipment, and there's an industrial railroad right over there. And the entrance to the place is lined with a bunch of antique tractors and antique buses, and there's quite a bit of farm machinery and stuff like that. I mean, this place looked really interesting at one time, and all of it's centered around this large mill building right here that looks to have been like a grist mill or something at some point. And that's the odd thing about it, is that there's actually no indication of what this thing was. I mean, obviously it's been set up as a tourist attraction, but there's nothing to indicate what it was or any particular reason why it's sitting out here abandoned by itself. Here's the antique tractor row that's lining the entrance to this place. As you can see, everything's overgrown, and it doesn't look like, I mean, it's been cut at some point, but the equipment and stuff's not being maintained. There's a John Deere and a nice Farmall, and what look to be a couple of International. There's a nice one with some tracks on it. That looks a little different. And then in the back there, it looks to be like a seed shaker or something that's being lost to that little swamp that's back there at the moment. Now, what seems to be odd about the place is that it's pretty obvious that some of this stuff's been here for quite a while, and then there's some stuff that looks like it's sort of new, like that big hit and miss engine over there looks pretty much new. And then the oddest thing is that this building right here, I mean, that looks like it hasn't been here a while. That's obviously a new installation, so some sort of work has been going on in this place as to what's going on here. Now, as I said before, I'm 20 miles south of Coshocton, Ohio, on Ohio Route 16, which is over there. And if any of you out there know what this place is, or why it's abandoned, or what the deal with it is, please let me know. Now, the most interesting aspect about this place is the little 3-foot gauge industrial railroad that's obviously been put around the perimeter of this place. I mean, a little bit of effort's been put in putting this in. There's 2 trains. They appear to have been made out of old Plymouth industrial locomotives. There's the red train over there that's always been modified to carry people, and it's been modified into like a variation of James the Red Engine from Thomas the Tank Engine. Over there is some attempt to have obviously built Thomas that we'll take a look at in a little bit. And over here is an unaltered Plymouth diesel with a couple of freight cars behind it. And up there is a Fairbanks track speeder that's been perched up on top of this bridge that the railroad goes over. Now, you can't see it from here, but if you look at the highway, this track appears to go over there, and it appears to loop all the way around the perimeter. I'll check that out in a bit, but obviously I've never heard of this operation, and I've never heard of it in sort of train ride in this area, so I'm kind of interested to know what the history of this place is. Here's the freight train. It's currently off on a little siding that they've apparently made to store it. This is the unaltered Plymouth industrial switcher, and it's got a freight train behind it. It consists of what are obviously some old mining cars that were used in coal mines. And the interesting aspect is they have quite a few of these narrow gauge flat cars here that they've used to try and display some of their artifacts that they've had at one point. As you can see, there's the flat car. The other train that I'll go over to in a minute has several of these on it. And these appear to be some mine cars they've modified into flat cars. Here's an old flat car that they've displayed some sort of golf cart or traction motor or something like that to haul baggage around on. And a bunch of spare wheels for their equipment. Now, I haven't measured the track, but to me it looks to be about 36-inch gauge, so if any of you guys out there are looking for narrow gauge equipment, here's a bunch of it that's obviously just sitting out somewhere, so if you're interested in that. And so here's another little mine car, and here is a crane that's part of a lot of the industrial equipment that's on display here. As you can see in the back of the property, there's quite a bit of farm machinery and stuff to take a look at. And taking a look at the other side of the freight train with the Plymouth switcher, is that on the other side of it that I didn't see before, it says Ball Powder, which I would assume is some sort of like explosives company. Now, these Plymouth switchers I know have been used for like powder making companies and dynamite factories and stuff like that, so that may very well have been what this was used for. Also, here's a railroad bridge they've set in place to go over their little train ride they've set up. And the interesting thing about that is that for some particular reason they've decided to take a railroad speeder and perch it on top up there. Now here's the sort of odd and somewhat creepy play area they apparently tried to set up. They had a pony ride that appears to have been some sort of seat ride that apparently it looks somebody tried to make out of like those old plastic horses you used to get on swing sets and wooden buckets from like Lowe's or something like that. Obviously I don't think that would pass any sort of safety inspection, but you know, somebody built it and I guess tried to operate it at some point. There's an abandoned swing set, slide that's never been put up, and obviously over here is some sort of like picnic area that I assume they were trying to make at some point. Tables and chairs and such. And then here is Thomas from earlier. Now, if originally from across the field I thought he was another Plymouth they tried to modify, but obviously he's been some sort of homemade parade float at some point, because as you can see he's made on top of an old truck chassis. There's Thomas. He's been made to drive at some point. I don't quite understand what their plan was with him here, but they've tried to display him on another piece of 3-foot gauge track. Here's some weights if anybody needs them for some odd reason. Anyway, corn husker, pile of tires that have been weighted obviously for some reason, steamroller, more farm machinery. I mean, that's the weird thing about it, is that other than the train ride, I mean, there's obviously no like rhyme or reason to the place. I don't quite understand what it was they were going for, other than just sort of like weird walk through history part. But again, we'll continue on and take a look at this stuff. Here's the inside of Thomas. As you can see, he's had controls at some point, so there's what I would assume would be his throttle. It looks like some sort of hydrostatic drive out of a dozer or something at one point. Here's something that says Alamo Steel and Machine Company of La Crosse, Wisconsin, with no metal or serial numbers, so if anybody has any idea if this was some sort of like custom build or this thing was made on purpose for this, I'm not quite sure. It does have a bell. With obviously no clanger in it. That's perfect. Anyway, here's some more weights that are just lying around for some particular reason. And a truck scale that has been installed for whatever reason. I'm assuming that maybe it was perhaps some sort of display to show how truck scales worked at one point or something like that. That's only what I can assume. As to why you need a display for a truck scale in a history park, that's beyond me. Here's some more of this odd carnival ride setup they've tried to do at some point. It's like, as I've said earlier, as you can see, it's one of those sort of portable rides. You see it like cheaper carnivals, where obviously, you know, it spins around and it goes sort of, you know, up and down in an arc sort of way. I've seen these before. It's just I've seen one with, you know, like regular seats. I've never quite seen one that's made out of, I mean, literally, look at it. It's literally made, it's those plastic horses that you get of like a Walmart swing set that they've modified and put on here. And then it's the like flower buckets from Lowe's that have been bolted on the arms, I guess, to put a kid in. I mean, does Ohio just not like have ride safety laws or anything like that? I mean, how would you get this inspected? Here's the odd set of tires that I could only assume was like either markers or, I don't know, part of like some weird game they tried to set up here. But anyway, as you can see, at least the place had proper bathroom facilities, as you can see. Here's the large frog pond that's next to the loading area for what apparently was the little passenger train that we'll take a look at here in a minute. I mean, obviously, if the place was cleaned up and it didn't look like an abandoned scrapyard, I mean, it would actually be a fairly picturesque little thing. But then here's the bullfrog pond. I've already scared about a dozen of the little things back in there. But let's go over here and take a look at our little bastardized James the Red Engine here. Well, here's the little 3-foot gauge industrial museum. I can only assume from the way it looks was that this was some sort of train ride that was meant to take you all the way around the perimeter, as I've said before. Because looking from the highway, the track continues on that way and disappears into the weeds. I'm not quite sure if the loop was ever completed or not, but we'll take a look here in a bit. Now, as I've said before, it appears to be its old mine rail on cross ties, and as best I can tell, it's about 3-foot gauge. But as I stated before, here is our little bastardized James the Red Engine. He appears to have been made out of the Plymouth industrial switcher. It's much like the one that's back there, but this one's been modified a bit for the kiddie train ride. But there's, I'm assuming that some sort of air compressor was put in there, because there's a steam whistle that I'm guessing was operated off air. Bell. This locomotive, I mean, it looks to be in somewhat, if not operable, at least be able to operate it or get it operable. Here's his control stand. His gauges are new, which they're sander, throttle, air brakes, oilers. I mean, somebody, obviously a little work went into him. There's his air reservoir, so the thing did have air brakes. Somewhat odd. His bell has a clanger, so I can get up to it. Oh, I can't reach it. Oh, there we go. Here's his control panel again, front and rear headlights, key ignition, air brake. It almost looks something now like an old Chance Rides control system or something like that. Here is what I can only assume was the passenger boarding area for you to get on this thing and for it to take you around. Obviously these are old Lincoln Pen sort of mine carts from a coal or quarry or something along those lines. Obviously they've had bent seats installed for people to sit on them and be hauled around. Now the only thing I don't understand is, and if you look on the other side, it says the same thing. It says think Lerm, L-E-R-M, and then think again, which I have absolutely no clue what that was supposed to mean, but anyway. There are those. And the odd thing was that apparently I guess this was supposed to catch your eye from the freeway or something, but it appears they meant to haul the flat cars with some of their equipment behind it as it went around, which as I said, I could only assume they meant to do that as like a way to catch people's attention from the freeway that's over there. But these are pretty nice industrial flat cars. They're Lincoln Pen, except right here where it has some sort of knuckle coupler. Which the odd thing about that is that appears to be some sort of like foreign coupler. I've seen like a couple of Russian videos where they use that sort of coupler on like Russian logging lines and stuff like that. It may very well be these things were imported here for use here, but I'm not quite sure. Obviously they're carrying, there's a real heavy hit and miss engine and a belt driven corn husker and a generator that looks like somebody made it out of the front end of a tractor, and another tractor. I mean, if this was cleaned up and you saw this thing going around from the interstate, I mean, obviously, yeah, this would draw attention. I mean, they had the right idea. It's just I don't get I mean, obviously a lot of effort went into putting all this out here. I don't quite understand why I never heard of it or why it's sitting here abandoned. Here's a sort of towed around, it's either like a welder or says it uses aircraft fuel there on the top there, so it's some sort of welding device or something like that. There's the train, gauge bars, another Lincoln Pen coupler on the rear. Just an odd little thing, I mean, interesting. Some spare ties and rails for the train ride over there, obviously. And somewhat less modern piece of equipment that's sitting out here. I guess anyone needs an Astro van. Here's the continuation of what I assumed was the train ride. As you can see, there's the loading area we just saw back there. The train would take off and it would come around this curve here and would show you this line of farm implements they have on display along the edge of the track here. It'd make this sharp turn and the track disappears into the weeds down this long straightaway, and I can only assume goes down to the perimeter where that steam shovel is down there and takes another sharp turn. And it's just me and the birds right here, right now. High voltage pedal tractor, apparently. Now here's a sign that apparently gives us an idea of what this used to be called. Apparently it was called Education of Yesterday at one point. Right now I'm on the side of the park that faces the parkway that's Ohio Route 16, as you can see here. Here's more of the abandoned track for the train ride that apparently goes all the way across the front here. So I'm assuming that's what the train ride was for, is to sort of catch people's eye and get them off the exit and back down in here. Down there are some cranes and some steam shovels we'll take a look at. Now here are the steam shovels that are on the far edge of the park, or I should say, well, sort of diesel. That's a bucket loader. That over there appears to have been a steam shovel. But it looks to have been, at one point they meant this to be an active display because you have these two large dirt piles next to each shovel and a sort of little bitty cat dozer they had to push this stuff around. I'm assuming what they meant to do was sort of give demonstrations of how these bucket loaders worked at one time. Here's the steam shovel, and I say steam shovel in a very looser end of the term. Upon closer inspection, it appears to be a very early model sort of diesel powered steam shovel. But it's an interesting piece to be sure. And too bad it's just kind of sitting out here rotting away. Again, here is where the industrial railroad comes through. I was right from earlier. It does come to the back of the property and makes a sharp turn. And then takes a long straight drag to the other end of the park down there and shows you some abandoned trucks and farm implements and such. Another row of abandoned antique tractors on display along the back area. Now, as you can see, someone's recently been down here because the grass that's been cut has tire tracks in it. So obviously it's been looked after in some sort of capacity. So there's the new grist mill and some more farm implements in a minute, and what appears to be a sort of big antique hit and miss engine sitting in the middle of the field over here. I'm on the very back end of the property right now. Obviously here's the long straightaway that would carry the train ride to the other end of the park. The tracks obviously has not been used in an extended period of time, as now it's starting to sink back into the ground and has rusted over. Here's some of the farm implements they would have shown you. And over here is a very antique hit and miss engine that I'd like to go to, but it's in the middle of this uncut grass and I don't want to step on a snake or anything, so I'm not going to take a look at it. But we're getting to the other end of the park soon, so we'll see what's on the far end of this place. Here we are in the back far corner of the museum property. Obviously the train ride came in around the very back of the property, made a wide swooping curve, and went back to the grist mill, which I would assume would have been the welcome center or the main museum or something like that. The head back over where the freight train we saw earlier was. Really only on this end it shows you some rusty farm implements and a couple of tractors and some tobacco carts and things like that. Other than that, it's really just farm machinery and stuff on this end. Heading back to the main museum building, following the tracks, I found another indicator of what this place used to be. As it says on the side of this tractor, assuming from what it says, I can tell that this is obviously some sort of museum that was started by a group called the Tri-Valley Antique Power Association. I don't know if that's still an active group or a defunct group or anything. There's the education of yesterday again, so that's obviously what the name of this place is. It says here, founded 2005, Route 16, the corner of Route 60 and Route 16, which is over there in Dresden, Ohio. So that's where we are, folks. So if you have any idea what this association was, or what this museum is, or why it's sitting here so defunct and such, please let me know. Again, founded 2005, and it's located in Dresden, Ohio, directly off the exit for the interstate. Okay, folks, well, we've pretty much concluded the tour around the loop of this little industrial railroad they've built for this park. Obviously, it just goes back over the bridge and back to the loading zone next to the building we've seen earlier. Really, all that's left is a couple of antique tractors, a crane, and a little bit of static logging equipment, and they have this sort of odd sort of table saw, sort of shop milled belt driven thing that I don't quite understand what it is. But other than that, that's pretty much what's on display here. Again, this is it's apparently called Education of Yesterday Park, and started by an Antique Power Association, and it's located directly off Route 16 back there in Dresden, Ohio. So if any of you folks out there know the history of this place, or why it appears to be sort of halfway abandoned or that sort of thing, or what went into this place, please let me know. This is Boiler Wash signing off. Thanks.